morning, everyone, and welcome to OHR In Conversation with, as we celebrate and honor Fair Housing Month. The Office of Human Rights is Prince George's County Civil and Human Rights Education and Enforcement Agency. We investigate complaints of discrimination, combat human trafficking all around the region, ensure equitable access for all people to county government services in the language of their preference, and we provide opportunities for learning and engagement on areas of social justice importance. My name is Kyla Hannington, and I'm the Public Outreach and Engagement Division Manager for the Office of Human Rights. And with me today as co-host is Jose Villegas, the Office of Human Rights Executive Director. OHR In Conversation is an opportunity to highlight some of the incredible civil rights and social justice people, places, and spaces in Prince George's County. And today we welcome long-term Office of Human Rights Senior Investigator Charles Floyd in conversation about fair housing. What is it? What does it mean to the Prince George's County? Why does it matter to residents? And what can we do about it? So Charles, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
To get us started today, could you take just a few minutes and tell viewers a little bit about you?
Well, I have been with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. It will be 18 years officially next month. I have investigated hundreds, maybe thousands of cases, and during my time, a lot of it has been employment. But over the past few years, housing cases there's been a definite uptick in housing complaints coming in. So that is something that I've been focusing on the past few years, as far as starting campaigns, bus stop shelters, posters, going to different outreach events, to increase, the visibility and let people know that housing discrimination does exist and they may have been subjected to it, and that without realizing it. So, with that, I also, do trainings. I meet with people. I go to different events. I speak. So whatever is asked of me, I try to do. But the main focus over the past few years has been housing.
Tell me about, like you said something about, there's been an uptick in cases over the last few years. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's the fact that I think with the current political climate over the past, I guess, going on 8-9 years, a lot of people, unfortunately, feel more emboldened to blatantly discriminate or state how they feel. And despite what is being said, the law has not changed. So, with that, then I think also with us increasing visibility, as far as that there's a county agency that investigates housing outside of HUD or Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, that has helped a lot of people who, didn't have the funds or the know-how to get out to Baltimore, or that they can do things online. So with us increasing our visibility, like I said, around the entire county, that has definitely increased our housing intakes. We used to maybe get a couple a year. Now I'm getting 2-3 almost every week as far as intakes go.
Wow.
I have several housing cases currently that I'm investigating, whereas before I may get one every couple years or so. So I just think a lot of it is that I think the new bases have come out that have helped, not helped in the sense of help things, but brought more attention for our source of income, citizenship, and immigration status bases. And those are kind of hot topics right now, especially source of income and citizenship status, and immigration status. So I think those main three things have led to a bigger uptick in incoming housing cases, because those are the main, especially source of income, kind of like the main thing that a lot of people are coming to us about.
Okay, so can you just, maybe we could back things up a little bit for viewers and just talk about, so what is housing discrimination? And then I want to go into detail about some of what you're talking about the bases on which people might experience that.
Well, housing discrimination is basically you're being treated differently because of a protected basis. And I'll, for example, like I said, I'll bring up source of income. If you're a person that receives housing assistance vouchers, you can't be denied housing just because you use a voucher. Unfortunately, there's a negative stereotype that people on housing vouchers are going to come in and they're going to damage things, or or they have a certain reputation, or they're going to come bring down the community. When in actuality, it's a lot of people who are on vouchers who've just had struggles throughout life. It could be for medical reasons that they're on a voucher. Some of them are, abuse survivors, domestic violence survivors who are just trying to get back on their feet. So there are a variety of reasons why someone may be on a housing voucher. But unfortunately, people have a stigma that, oh, they're on a housing voucher, they're lazy, they're just trying to get by. I have to go to work every day, and they just sit and collect a check, when that's not necessarily the case. So a lot of people who are on housing vouchers miss out on affordable living or places to live because just the simple fact that people don't want them there. A lot of people don't want to go through the process of dealing with housing vouchers. Landlords, I mean, by that. So there is a process. It's not as simple, oh, you show a credit score, you move in. With housing voucher, yes, there is an inspection completed, things like that, and it has to be approved by the housing authority before a person can move in. So unfortunately, a lot of people miss out on housing because these landlords or owners don't want to deal with the process. If they want someone in immediately, they'll do that, and they'll bypass someone. Also with like the source of income, people, the income issue is a problem too. So a lot of times they'll say, oh, you have to make 3 times your amount. Your income must be 3 times the amount of the rent, monthly rent. But for people on housing vouchers, they're not unable to do that. So they're knocked out in that sense. So that is why, like, making fair housing visibility more invisible is important, because a lot of people don't know these things. A lot of people will automatically accept the fact that, no, well, I only bring in $200 worth of income or $600 worth of income a month. Of course, you're not going to make, the $5,000 that's needed to get a place. So a lot of that is used against people, but people unfortunately don't know that. They just a lot of people will just accept things, and it's on us, our job with, doing, things like this, or going out to outreach events or doing training, so people know that, hey, maybe something did happen. And if something didn't happen ultimately, at least you can bring it up. Someone can look into it as a neutral party, look into it and to see if there's something there or not. So that's why, like, fair housing is important, because people need to learn the the nuances of what discrimination is, because, the goal is to make inclusive communities for all people to live in, and, ensure equal access to everybody to find housing.
Now, Charles, if I may, you mentioned source of income and specifically government vouchers. What other things could qualify for people to qualify as a source of income, even if they don't have a government housing voucher?
Yeah, sure. So like lawful professions or occupations, that's one way to show income. And I'll say keyword lawful. Um, you can use bank statements, and I kind of have my notes up a little bit here, but government issued letters, pay stubs, letters from your employer, federal, local, state government assistance counts under that. That includes the vouchers, medical assistance, rental assistance, rental supplements, inheritance, pension, annuity, child support, trust, or investment accounts count as a source of income. Any gift that you receive verified by letter from someone counts as a source of income. And any sale or pledge of property, if the sale will result in proceeds that the recipient will benefit in within 60 days of the application of the housing unit. So basically, I mean, it covers a great deal of areas as far as source of income goes. So basically it's pretty much, as long as you're making it lawfully, and can show that, you're pretty much covered.
Thank you.
We actually have a question already from a viewer. I'm going to put it up on screen here. So this is Dr. Stewart, one of our regular viewers. Great to have you back, Dr. Stewart. Dr. Stewart writes that some of her students are graduating from high school with disabilities. How can they prove source of income if they do not have a signatory authority?
Now, by signatory authority, do you mean like a guardian?
Well, that's a great question.
Dr. Stewart can
hopefully Dr. Stewart. Hopefully, Dr.
But I'll just say in general, no one should be denied housing because of a disability. But there are still rules and regulations that, regardless of your source of income, that a person, you still have to follow, you still have to meet typically. And every place is kind of case by case. But, being on a voucher or receiving assistance doesn't just automatically make someone skip all over the application process and all that. You still have to be approved. You still have to pass background check eventually, which now cannot be done until after the application has already gone through and is approved or denied approved by the leasing office or the landlord. Then they can do a background check after that. But there are still those rules. Kind of like I was saying, like the income thing. A lot of places you have to make 3 times the amount of the monthly income to even be able to be approved. Or a person on a voucher, their income should only be 3 times the amount of what they actually have to pay. So if you're on a voucher and you have to pay, and your contribution to the voucher is $10 a month, as long as you can make $30 a month, that's what covers you in that situation. Whereas a person who's not on a voucher or not receiving assistance, they have to follow the rules. So there are still rules and regulations. Being on a voucher or receiving assistance does not guarantee that you will get housing, but at the same time, you're supposed to have that equal access to attempt to get it.
Right. And I want to just circle back to something that you said just in response to Dr. Stewart about disabilities, that like there's more ways that housing discrimination can occur than source of income. So it's also like not lawful to discriminate based on an ability or disability, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are 18 protected bases for Prince George's County. Like HUD only has 7. But yeah, I mean, they're I guess you want to call the cliche, protected bases: race, sex, religion, disability, national origin. I mean, there are things along those lines. So there are 18 different areas that our agency specifically looks into. So yeah, disability is a major one that I get also outside of source of income, because a lot of people with disabilities are denied, not necessarily denied housing, but they're denied the accommodations or the modifications that they request. And I think people need to realize there's a difference. Even with that, because a lot of people will assume like, well, I requested this, you're supposed to do it. That's not necessarily true. The properties are responsible for common areas as far as accommodations go, whether that is adding a handicap spot or doing things like that to make your quality of life living on the property easier. But things within the home or things that are not common areas, those are considered modifications that the person who is requesting it is typically responsible for the cost of. And when they move from the property, they have to change it back to how it was initially before they changed it. So that's a big issue that has come up, and it's a fine line of trying to figure out what's common area, what's not common area. There are some landlords, and I've seen some properties who will offer like financial assistance and modifications. And sometimes they'll just go ahead and do it. But like I said, there are rules to everything. Just because you request it doesn't mean you will get it. Just because you're denied doesn't necessarily mean it's discrimination. But that's the point of us, to look into that, to investigate whether or not, a law is being broken or violated on your behalf. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a situation of you requested something that you want, and it's considered a modification. You got to pay for it, and that's not them. They didn't deny you, just that you're responsible for footing the bill for it. So everything varies. Everything is very nuanced. It's a case by case thing. I can't say there's a concrete template on everything, but every case is discussed. Everything is gone through, because we try to be thorough as possible with the investigations, and we want everyone to feel like even if it doesn't go in their favor, that things were looked into thoroughly, and that they're satisfied with it.
I want to thank you for Charles for discussing the distinction between reasonable accommodation and modifications, especially in the housing setting, because I know we usually get a lot of those mixed up. People think that their request is accommodation, but it's not. So thank you for that. Now, can you talk about a little bit about the appraisal bias? I know the county has passed a law a couple of years ago about that. Can you tell us a little bit about appraisal bias?
Sure. So appraisal bias is basically if you're trying to sell your home, and you have people come in to do an estimate or do an appraisal on it, or or whatnot, or trying to get a property, and they come in, and let's say you're black, and if you're black and you go in with this person, and they oh, well, this house is worth $150,000, but then that same appraiser will come there with someone who is of a different race, let's say white or Asian or something, and they'll come in there, well, this house is worth $250,000. Just because of the race, and it's sad that a lot of people, or because of protected bases, are being lowballed in situations where they could make more money or benefit more just because of how they look or their characteristics. And I've seen situations where studies done where there will be a home, and they'll put up pictures of a black family everywhere, and the appraiser will say one price, and they'll take that same home and just change it to pictures of a white family, and the appraisal price estimate will skyrocket. So that's something that people also need to be aware of when you get so it's important when you get an appraisal done, try to get more than one if possible, a second or third opinion, just to kind of see where everything falls into the matter, in the price range. So that is like another thing that people don't really think about when trying to buy or sell a home. They'll just go with what is told to them. But if you feel as though something isn't right, especially with the appraisal, it's okay to get a second opinion. And that's definitely helpful, before you come to us, to show like, hey, when I had this person look, they said this price, but when I had this person look, now they're saying this price. So it's good to have that comparison. Just, don't just come in with I had one person look and that was it. We need to, it's helpful to have those comparisons, to have the evidence to support what you're saying. Because like, as I mentioned before, when we do investigations during the investigative phase, we're neutral, meaning that we're not, representing the person that complained. The person who complained does have a burden of proof on them. We do go to the landlord, who is the respondent, and ask them for documentation. We do understand that there are certain documents that the respondent will have that the complainant won't have. So we do request those from the respondent. But when it comes to appraisal, if you want to make a complaint, definitely make sure that you've had more than one appraisal done, just to show that there's possible discrimination occurring. So that's another big thing that has been kind of in the media and been growing as of late, not just here in Maryland, but around the country.
Okay, thank you. I know you mentioned, based on this conversation, you identify potential entities that might do some um, some discriminatory actions. For example, you just describe a little bit about appraisal. So that would mean companies that provide appraisals. And you mentioned landlords in a way. Are those the only two entities that can that could be violating the county's housing or laws, or there are other entities that you uh, can provide that the viewers or the listeners that could potentially be violation or could potentially violate the county's anti-discrimination law in housing?
Um, like I said, I would say like yeah, landlords, real estate agents have done it. I've had a few cases where real estate agents have maybe said or done things that were discriminatory, and to them they thought it was normal. They thought it was normal to say that, oh, they don't want to rent to someone who's on a voucher, or they don't want this type of person there. Now there are exceptions to the rule. Um, if it's a like a single family house being sold or rented out by the owner, and they don't own more than 3 single family homes at one time, there are like they can be more selective in who they want to move into the home. There's also private clubs are exempt, like religious organizations are exempt. Um, Owner occupied dwellings with 4 or more units, 4 or fewer units are exempt, meaning if I own a house and I have 2 rooms or 3 rooms that I want to rent out to people, you can be more selective in who you want to move into your unit, into your home. There are exceptions for people at the housing for older individuals, but those are the exceptions. Other than that, typically anyone else that has, provides housing, they're not exempt from the discrimination laws, to include banks. Banks are also included. Banks do discriminate as far as loans go, housing loans. So that can be an issue also when it comes to, especially historically, people of color or Black people have had issues with obtaining bank loans that are, or they'll give them high interest rates, or they'll be flat out denied. But someone, if a single mother goes in, she may be denied, but a male who has the same credit score and income will be approved with the low interest rate, or the woman may get a high interest rate versus the man. So banks are another big place that can, potentially discriminate in housing.
Okay.
So I really appreciate this conversation, and one of the things that we have a lengthy set of questions from Dr. Stewart, which I'm going to put up in just a second because Dr. Stewart is bringing in the great questions. I just want to touch on something that I experienced. As we all know, I've lived 1,000 lives, and one of my previous lives was as a single mom trying to rent a house. It wasn't in this jurisdiction, but I saw lots of ads that were like no kids, right? And I'm not talking about 55 plus places, but I also know what it can be like in those circumstances where you see it doesn't feel great, but you just move on because you need to like find housing. So I think, am I right in thinking there can sometimes be a gap between people experience discrimination and them feeling like they've got the energy or the oomph to come into the office? And where I'm going with that, I guess part B of that question is do you have words of encouragement to help people maybe dig a little deeper and make that complaint if they feel like something's not quite right?
Sure. I always tell people, if you feel something, if you feel like you were discriminated against, it doesn't hurt to contact, whether it's us, well, I'll say our agency, to contact our agency, just to see. I mean, like we tell people, and I do intakes every week, I let people know that, hey, us talking about this today doesn't guarantee something will be taken, but I can at least sit here and listen, and we can try to figure out who you need to go to, if not us. And sometimes people just want to vent. And I definitely get I've definitely been there where I'll go through something, and then as time goes on, it just bothers you, and it just, see, like you just feel as though something wasn't right. and then sometimes you just let it go, or you moved on. Like, oh, I've found somewhere else to live. It's fine, but then you also have to take into account, if this has happened to you, imagine how many other people it's happened to before you, and how many people it's going to happen to after you. And like the children thing, that is a thing, and people will say, kind of like, I don't say trigger words, but they'll say little things like, well, this, if you have children, well, this is a quiet area, or this area doesn't have any playgrounds, or this area, there's a lot of older individuals who live here. It's not really any children around. And they'll try to say little things like that to discourage you from moving on to that property or moving into that area. Or if it's, I've seen situations where a Muslim family might want to rent something, or trying to get a home, and the real estate agent will say, well, this is a good Christian community. It's like, okay, why does that matter? Like, why are you telling me that? That's kind of one of those little things to try to discourage people from moving into certain areas. Or everyone here, if you're a single mother and you have your kids, and there's, most people here are married couples, or they're, there's stay-at-home wives here, like things like that we just kind of like, oh, they're just giving us information, but the information is meant to discourage you. So my recommendation to people who feel something, as far as housing goes, you have 1 year from the incident to file a complaint. So if something happened 6 months ago and it's still on your mind and you're dwelling on it, and you just want someone to talk to about it, just to kind of see, we're always, available to speak during our intake appointments. Like I said, it's not a guarantee something will be taken, but at least gives you an opportunity to talk about it, hash it out. If you don't like what we're saying or whatever, you have other options out there that you can get maybe a second opinion from. But the goal is that no one should feel as though they're not worthy of housing, or because I have children, I can't live here, or anything. If you can pay the rent or pay the mortgage or do whatever you can do, ultimately that's what should matter. Now, after you move in, if destroy the place or something like that, that's a different situation. But at least the initial, you should be given that opportunity to move in. And if you feel as though something's wrong, or you feel as though you were denied something because of whatever protected basis, it's okay to speak up and say something. And even if it doesn't go in your favor, it at least, if a case is taken, it at least puts that landlord or bank or whoever on notice that they may need to change the way they do handle their practices, or what they're saying, or even who they're hiring to work for them or represent their company or their real estate agency.
Thank you. Go
And
ahead.
I mean, add a little bit before Kyla, you show Dr. Stewart's question, is that I know you mentioned at the beginning that there's some exception to it, and what you also stated is that the people should come to or contact us to figure it out, not for them to make that assessment whether they accept it, there's an exception or not, even if it's a single house or an apartment. You can also have the conversation with Investigator Floyd and the other investigator, and then let us determine whether it is an exemption or not exemption property. So yes, Kyla.
All right, thank you. So we have a lot of questions, and Dr. Stewart has brought a series of questions here, and also some nice comments, noting that these conversations are so important. She writes, discrimination is real, and conversely, what we may deem as discrimination might not actually be. And she has some questions. She said, if a person with a physical disability needs a physical accommodation, are they able to make the change prior to closing, or do they have to wait until after closing? And when should they make a complaint? How soon?
So when you say closing, I guess as far as purchasing a home, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, you know what?
Um,
Actually, I will correct myself and say that was part two. Let me start with part one because that
okay.
might lead into this a little bit better. Sorry, I apologize. So, how long does the process take? Is there a fee associated? So, I think this is to do with the investigative complaint because this came in a few minutes ago when you were talking about that. And
Mhm.
she also writes, should a buyer get their own independent appraisal? And if the buyer and seller are related to the real estate agent, inspector, or appraiser? These are great questions, Dr. Stewart. You were bringing it. And then there's the part two, which I will bring up after you've had a chance to think about these, Charles.
Okay. So I will start with how long does the process take? In housing cases, the goal is to have them completed within 100 days. Um, and to be honest, that's not always the case. That's the goal, is what we strive for. But for us, it's important to be thorough. So for us, that's the most important thing. But yeah, typically housing cases, we try to close them within 100 days. If we don't close them within 100 days, we do send out a letter explaining as to why it was not closed. But yeah, the law is 100 days. Um, so, and that depends, and it's like I say, it's case by case. That can be how long it takes. Because we do mediations also, so sometimes mediations can stretch things out. Um, the respondent can need more time to do things, conducting interviews. Sometimes the complainants will make a complaint and they're difficult to get in contact with after they make the complaint. So that can stretch things out. So there are a variety of factors that stretch it out. So there is no, the law is 100 days, but if we go past 100, we do let the person know why it's gone past 100. But ultimately, we want to be thorough. Um, there is no fee associated with this. We're even though we're a county government agency, and like I said, we're neutral in things. So we investigate other county government agencies. We do them also. So there's no fee. It's part of being part of the government. So you don't have to come out of pocket for anything. Sometimes people will ask should they get a lawyer or not. I let them know that's up to them. This isn't a court proceeding at the moment. But if they want to get counsel, that's totally up to them. Um, then as far as the independent appraisal goes, that is up to the person if that's something that they want to do. And that kind of goes back to the getting one and then maybe getting a second opinion or third opinion on things. That's kind of up to them. But it is helpful that, if you have an appraiser, if there's a big gap between what one appraiser says and another appraiser says, it's kind of good to get those comparables or, have, maybe testers go in and use the appraisers to see how they react to them. And say, what if the buyer or seller are related to the real estate agent? That really doesn't matter. Discrimination is discrimination. I've had a few cause cases, meaning I found sufficient evidence to show that discrimination occurred because, the real estate agent is, I think it was one case where they were friends and they denied a person, I think it was maybe because of their race or something along those lines. And the real estate agent and the person who were selling were two buddies who grew up together in another country and who moved here. And we found laws against both of them. It was one case with two separate respondents, two cases, two separate respondents, but the same complainant. And we found cause against both of them. So that doesn't matter. Discrimination is discrimination, and it doesn't matter if you know a person or not. You should be treated fairly.
Okay, I'm gonna get the part two. And Dr. Stewart, I think you might need to go in a little bit more clarity here if you got a chance in the comment. But let me read this out loud. If a person with a physical disability needs a physical accommodation, are they able to make the change prior to closing, or do they have to wait until after closing? And when should they make a complaint? How soon? And I think, Charles, you probably already answered that, which is that there's a year from the, am I right? There's a year from the date where a person feels discrimination occurred, that they have 365 days to make a complaint. Is that right?
Yeah, 1 year. Yeah, with housing, yeah, it's 1 year from the incident. Yeah, 1 year. So you have 1 year from the incident to come to us. Our statute of limitations to at least file a complaint. the contacting us. Let me clarify. The contacting us has to be within the 1 year. So, if a year has gone by, now you're calling us, unfortunately, that's past the statute of limitations. But if you're, it's like a week before the time runs out, you contact us to schedule an intake. The intake may go past the year mark, but you've already contacted us before that year was up. So you're covered as far as that goes. So long as you make contact to let me know that you want to file a discrimination complaint, well, at least do an intake, has to be within that 1 year. Now, as far as the closing go and the accommodation, I'm going to say I'm not 100% sure on that, but just thinking about it, I would assume that any accommodation would have to be made possibly after closing, because then I guess it's guaranteed that you're moving in. But prior to closing, you don't. I guess accommodations can be made, but then you may change your mind or things may fall through. So now the accommodation has been made in a home or apartment or something that you're not moving into. So I would assume, but I can look into it to find out, that accommodations probably happen after closing when we know that the person is moving onto the property.
And just to clarify for those that when investigator or when Charles mentioned statute of limitation, for those attorneys that might be watching, it's the time to file. So it's I know that attorneys might say, well, statute of limitation by the law is something else. No, what we mean is the time to file the complaint with us. Also, just want to point out this one too, just to elaborate. What Dr. Stewart mentioned is it's reasonable accommodation in reasonable modification. So I know that she indicated in her comment physical accommodation, but is a reasonable accommodation is a change of policy or a modification that is the structural change of an apartment or a house. Now, if it's a house, when you're referring to closing, if it's a house that you buy in, you want to make something. If you want to build a ramp, for example, I think there's on that case probably it's something that you will be your property. You might probably have to do it after you close. If like Charles mentioned, if it's an apartment that you are signing a lease, then typically the landlord will not make any modification to an apartment in advance before you're signing a lease, because again, like Charles mentioned, something could fall and then you're at the end are not signing a lease, and then they make these changes. So, and again, the changes it's out of your pocket. So if you have not signed a lease, then you shouldn't be making any modifications in the property, because again, you might not sign that a lease and you make some changes to the apartment, you would probably not get the money back.
Yeah, and I'll just say from like my personal experience, at my home, I had a wheelchair ramp built in front of my house, for a family member, and it's not something that I could go to my HOA and say, well, I need this modification or I need this accommodation made. No, it was something I had to do out of pocket, and get it built. And whenever I move, I'm like I'm out of pocket and have the ramp taken out. Unless by some chance the person who moves in next wants to ramp. Otherwise, that's something that I have to restore it back to how the home was at the time. So right now, it is a modification made for my disabled person living in my home. But once I move, that's something I'm going to be responsible for dismantling and removing on my own. And that's kind of the same thing with the reasonable modifications within like apartments. Yes, things can be changed and you may change them, but when you move out, you have to restore them back to how they were originally. Now, there are situations, some apartment complexes do have what's called, wheelchair accessible units where things may be lower, or handicap units where things may be lower, or have a rolling shower. So if those things are already there, they're already there. But yeah, any modification inside the home that you want to make on your own, typically you have to, like I said, come out of pocket on your own for it, or any assistance that you have. And when you leave, you have to return it back to its original status. And like I said, the accommodation thing, as Jose was saying, is most of policies and practices. I need if you need a handicap, you need a handicap parking spot, or a specific spot that doesn't cause an undue hardship on others. That's fine. Or it's okay if I pay, I don't receive this. Can I pay this? Can I pay the rent, my rent line, because I'm unable to come to the office? I mean, those are things that can be, modified, for us accommodations go that people can get. So yeah, modifications are more so physical. Accommodations are more so on paper, or just making things easier so you can, have equal opportunity to use and enjoy the property.
All right, thank you, Charles. We have a question from our old friend Tiana. It's actually, I also have the same question, but let's put Tiana's up here.
Hi, Tiana.
Yeah. How can a potential landlord avoid breaking housing laws, and where can they get this info Okay, so I did notice that Charles was having some, I'm sure we all heard he was having some connection problems. So I'm going to flip this over to you, Jose, if you're comfortable taking a stab at this. How can a potential landlord avoid breaking housing laws, and where can they get this info before becoming a landlord? I'm going to repeat that for you, Charles. How can a potential landlord avoid breaking housing laws, and where can they get this info before becoming a landlord?
Well, a potential landlord can avoid breaking housing laws by becoming familiar with the fair housing laws. And I guess that's the easiest way to put it. I know a lot of them do go through trainings, but even with that, a lot of them will still, like I said, deny source of income or deny people with vouchers. And so the biggest way as potential landlord is to learn these things is to become familiar with the fair housing laws, county, state, and federal. There are trainings, like our office offers training, and not just on housing, but employment and other areas that we cover. But that's one way to learn. It's always fine to call and ask questions. That's one way. And what was the other part of the question? Oh, you're muted.
I just had to turn it back up. Okay. So yeah, where they can get this info, I just put the website in the chat, civilrights.mypgc.us. I'm going to say this out loud. I'm sorry, Charles, just a second, just for people who don't have screen readers. Charles also mentioned that you could call our office. Our phone number is 301-883-6170. I'll put that on screen as well. And you can also email us at ohrstaff@pgcmd.gov, and I'll put those in the links where you're watching.
Yeah.
And just to kind of I'm sorry, Charles. Just to highlight, just to remind the viewers, we in the Office of Human Rights investigate the housing discrimination under our local ordinance. If by any chance you have a federal loans that require HUD to provide a specific training, then that's something that you will have to contact HUD or Maryland Commission on Civil Rights from the state of Maryland. Just wanted to put that out there as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you for everyone for that. And I do want to go back to National Fair Housing Month, because we are National Fair Housing Month. And I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit about what we have a whole month for this. Let's talk about National Fair Housing Month.
Okay. Well, Fair Housing Month was created to commemorate the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So it's just kind of like the purpose of it is to, try to eliminate housing discrimination, promote inclusive communities, and ensure equal access to housing, regardless of any protected basis. So the month exists so people can learn these things, because like I said at the beginning, and I will keep saying, a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people just go with whatever they're told. And that's not always the case. And that doesn't mean people are always discriminating, but it's good to know when you go into a situation to have a little knowledge, to notice little red flags, or I guess some people say brown flags that may not be like a massive thing, but just kind of make you think. Um, so Fair Housing Month is just this time where there's not just this going on. There's a lot of trainings, events, things going on around the country in Prince George's County and Maryland, just to get people out to learn that, discrimination is not just employment. It's not just going out to a restaurant and feel like you're being denied service. It's not just that. Housing is the one thing that everyone deserves, and deserves an opportunity to receive it. And that's why the Fair Housing Month exists, because we get so caught up in what's going on that we kind of put our blinders up and just go with the flow, when there are situations where you should have gotten something and you didn't get it because of your sex, because of your race, or because you're on a voucher. And that's not fair. And, like I said before, you may not, in your situation, it may not go in your favor if you make a complaint, but always put in the back of your mind, if this is happening to me, how many others before me have this happened to? How many others after me will this happen to? Possibly happen to? And if you make a complaint, that
Charles,
yes.
Charles, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop you just for a second because you were breaking up to the point that we actually couldn't hear you. So I'm going to, but can you try again? Because now you sound nice and clear. I'm so sorry. No. Okay.
No, I do want to jump on the thing while Charles is trying to fix his connection. Is that I know that some people have heard in the news that had the federal government or organization or department that regulate housing in the country are making some regulation changes throughout the country, and just want to let the viewers know that whatever changes the federal government takes, it will not impact our county laws, and so whatever, if the federal government were to reduce the number of protected classification or protected classes, I know that based on laws, case law, sexual orientation, sexual identity was part of that. They're trying to remove that. The county has it as a established law, so any changes in the federal level will not impact us. So that means that sexual orientation, gender identity will continue to be protected here in Prince George's County. Just wanted to kind of highlight that. Also, another thing that I want to point out is that dealing with housing discrimination, just because you're denied an apartment or a housing, or you're being a victim of appraisal bias or victim of any financial transaction, that it doesn't mean that that's the only protection that you have. Harassment is protected under housing. So if you already have a place and either the workers, any of the workers, any of the management harass you based on a protected class, or subject you to sexual harassment or any sexual request, that is still protected in the county housing laws. Just want to just inform the viewers of that information as well. Turn it back to Kyla so you can ask any follow-up question for
Well,
Charles?
I appreciate that because I think that's a really important thing. When I go out and I'm out in the community, I often hear people say like what's happening in the federal government and how is it impacting what we're in Prince George's. So I really appreciate highlighting that Prince George's County has its own statutes. We are continuing to work to protect the rights of all people. And so thank you for that. Charles, welcome back. I know the signal. This is life in the virtual space can be unpredictable. So thanks for sticking in with us. And one of the things, and this is maybe like a little nuanced, but it's something that has come up for me before. And so, because I've had this, I'm thinking maybe viewers may experience this, is that we use this term fair housing. And we talk about Fair Housing Month. And I think that I know what fair housing is, like that fair housing is that housing should be fair. But then I also hear people say Prince George's County doesn't have fair housing. And I think this is like a confusion around a federal, and correct me if I'm wrong, confusion around the name of a federal law versus the idea of housing being fair. Am I right in understanding this nuance? Did my question?
Yeah, it makes sense. We do. Our law is not necessarily called fair housing law. It's under our Division 12. But housing is protected. Our law is kind of created to very similar to the federal fair housing law as far as what we can do. And the laws and the that they follow, we pretty much follow that. The difference is that we just don't have it on that federal level. But like I said, with us, if you go to the federal level, there's only 7 areas that are protected. Where with us, we have 18. So with us, it may not be at a federal level, but you have more opportunities. If you believe a certain characteristic that you're being denied for, we have that the federal level doesn't have. Some people just like to go federal because federal sounds, I don't know, bigger or more extensive. But we have our laws that we investigate. Eventually down the road, we hope to have a work share agreement with HUD in the future. But until then, we have the county laws that we do. So that is fair housing. It may not say explicitly fair housing, but we do have anti-discrimination housing laws that we investigate. We have a whole law section about it that we look into.
Okay, and if I may add a little bit, the reason for that is it is technically, like Charles said, it's similar laws. The reason is that we try not to use fair housing law is because people out there know fair housing law means the federal law.
Oh,
and if they hear, oh, okay, Prince George's County investigate fair housing law, they will think, oh, investigate the federal law, and we do not investigate the federal law. On the other hand, people might hear that MCCR use federal housing, and they can do that because they do have a partnership with HUD that the state investigate federal housing laws. But even though our name we try not to refer as a fair housing law in the county, it's just the county anti-discrimination statute that includes housing, then it's provides similar or more, like Charles mentioned, more protection than the federal laws. I know the time is running, and I think you briefly mentioned this at the beginning, Charles. But I know that 2 years ago, in 2023, the county passed a Returning Citizen Fair Chance to Housing Act in the county that we investigate in the county. Can you tell the viewers what is that law is about, who is intended to protect, and how?
Okay. The returning citizens is basically for those individuals who have, completed their, any prison time or, that they were convicted of. And the goal of that is to provide them an opportunity to find housing without immediately being denied because of their criminal history. So the law is designed that a person is not, their criminal history is not looked into after they've done the application, and whether they've been, if they've been approved, then they can look into the person's background. But even then, you can't knock someone for something that they did. There are exceptions to the rule. There are felonies like murders, rapes, kidnapping, things like that will stick with you forever. But I know, it should be a case-by-case basis. If I did something when I was 17, let's say 40 years ago, and you're holding that against me now, by the law, you have to provide notification or the reason in writing as to why I'm being denied. I had a case before where there was a couple who met all the criteria for this, like luxury apartments, did all that stuff, but then they were denied that because the husband allegedly had been pulled over for, I think, a DUI in Texas 20-some years ago that was dropped, and he was denied housing because of that. So if he's being denied that, imagine how many people are just being denied housing off of little things that you may have done when you were a teenager, when you were in your 20s, but now you're in your 40s and you've never been in trouble since then, but they will use that as a reason not to have you move into the property. But like I said, there are, they can't go back any further than 7 years as far as looking. But like I said, there are the exceptions. There are the felonies, like if you've been convicted of selling drugs, like murder, sexual assaults, kidnapping, child sex offender list, things, crimes involving children, etc. There are certain ones that they can't deny you because they don't want you on the property. But things that you've done in the past that, yeah, I went to jail for 3 years, 25 years ago, but since then I've worked, I've done these things, and there are places that will still hold that against a citizen just because, oh, you got a criminal past, we don't want you on the property, even though you've done nothing wrong. Since then, you did your time, you've done your debt to society, you've done what you needed to do. So the point of it is to give those people an opportunity, especially the incarceration rate for Black males are, we make up 12% of the population, but the majority of those incarcerated are Black males. The law is also designed to kind of help them, well, Blacks in general, or people in general, just to kind of give them the opportunity to get back out there, get housing, get on their feet, if they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate this conversation. And I just want to say for viewers, like, obviously there's so much to take in. And what we really want you to go away with is this awareness that housing is protected. And to, if you're in doubt, call our office. If you're a potential landlord or a real estate agent or HOA, and you just want to learn more, like, call our office. We do trainings. We want to give you this information. We are out of time. So Investigator Floyd, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and navigating internet challenges and just sticking with us. I really appreciate that. And all that you do for the residents of the county on a daily basis. For all of you watching, whether you're joining us live or watching on demand later, thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. And we hope you've gotten something out of today. We invite you to check out our office at civilrights.mypgc.us. I put it in the chat where you're watching as well. So if you're watching on demand later, check out that live chat feature and you'll get some links as well as our phone number and email address. We want you to check out our website too to see all the ways that we're here for you, including other of our upcoming events. We have a lot going on this week alone. Our Youth Leadership Academy kicks off a 4-week stint at Hillcrest Heights. Our Young Adult Book Club continues at Upper Marlboro Branch Library as we discuss the graphic novel Kaya. And I'll be at the District 1 Town Hall on Thursday night with Councilmember Denoga and County Executive Brayboy. So just this week alone, there's lots of chances for you to find us. And we hope you'll check those things out, and we'll see you soon. Again, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Jose, for co-hosting. And we hope to get in touch soon. Bye, everyone.